We have a dust storm coming. Did you see that, Perez?
Yes, I did.
By the way, live from the Trustmark studios of the Gallo Show, and Shad White is in the house. We'll talk to him in a moment or two. Trustmark wants to stand by business owners, and they do that every single day. Learn more at trustmark.com/business for more information here. I had it here somewhere. Here it is. Did you hear this, Shad?
I did not, no. Dust bowl.
There's a giant Saharan dust plume traveling nearly 5,000 miles, headed right for Mississippi, the Gulf Coast area this week. You can't make this stuff up.
Are there locusts in there? Is that
No. Aside from hazy skies and breathing issues for people with allergies and asthma.
Wait a minute. Stop. Breathing issues?
Yes.
We're already having breathing issues.
I know it.
I agree.
So if you've got COVID and the dust storm, it does make for some beautiful sunsets and sunrises.
Can I just stay in the house?
This week, states on the Gulf from Florida to Texas, we are the landmass in between, will see beautiful sunsets with amplified colors of orange and red. Be ready, these skies will make for some awesome Instagram photos. This happened, and I forgot when it was. It was a big storm out west, dust storm. And there was red dust on the cars, and I forgot when it was. It was 15 or 20, maybe longer than that. But I mean, it was almost like you parked on a gravel road when you went out in the parking lot. Just absolutely amazing.
This year cannot get any stranger.
No,
is there a Saharan dust storm?
Halfway through.
Jeez.
I know.
It's like, when the media coming, Mama? When the media coming?
Hey, Armageddon.
I know.
Bruce Willis. Come on.
All right. Speaking of Armageddon, this was a shocker on here. And I tried to read some of it, and I said it took a Rhodes Scholar to read this, and 2 Rhodes Scholars to read the reply from the Department of Education. But give me a thumbnail view for the people who are not going to read all of this one, as far as what does this mean that you found in the audit and the investigation.
Sure. So the state auditor's office did a performance audit of the Mississippi Department of Education, and specifically we were looking at what has been called the Office of Dropout Prevention. This was an office that was required to be set up back in 2006. So the legislature passed a law, it got signed, and the law required this office, the Office of Dropout Prevention, to be set up to help craft a strategic plan for the state of Mississippi to raise our graduation rate, which is a great goal. At the time, the graduation rate was about 61% here in Mississippi, and as a part of that law, the legislature said you need to increase the graduation rate from 61% up to 85%. So when we went and looked to see how that office was functioning and how we were calculating the graduation rate, and we found a couple things that I think are important and interesting. The first is that since about 2009, the Office of Dropout Prevention has basically not existed. So we have not had a director of the Office of Dropout Prevention, which is something that is specifically required under the law. The Office of Dropout Prevention, of course, because it hasn't really existed, hasn't done the services that it was intended to do. It hasn't helped the local school districts in the way it was intended to help. And when we interviewed a lot of the employees at MDE, many of them were just simply unaware of the responsibilities of that office, didn't know about the state's strategic plan, which was several years old, to boost graduation rates. So the short answer, the short version of the story is that the Office of Dropout Prevention is required under the law to exist and do some stuff, and it didn't exist since about 2009.
Was there any follow-up from the legislature in the education committees of the House or Senate on this at all?
I don't know. Every year, every agency goes before the legislature and sits down, and we have to defend our budget. So I've done it twice, and what you do is, as an agency head, you go and you bring some people with you, and you sit down, and the legislators ask you hard questions about how you spent your money, whether you followed all the laws that apply to you. So MDE has to do that every year, too. I don't know if they were asked in years past about the Office of Dropout Prevention, but I think they ought to ask now.
Whose responsibility would this be?
So ultimately,
because number one, you said 2009. There's been nothing. I'm not sure from the inception of it till 2000. Was there anything from the inception, the year afterwards, Was it supposed to become effective in 2009, or when was it supposed to become effective?
No. The office was created and started on good footing, followed the law back in 2006. So we had a little bit of time where it was doing what it needed to do, and
then
existed.
2009, it just fell apart.
So a director leaves, and then
Dr. White didn't come in until 4 years later.
Correct. Yeah, that's right. That's right. So this
but
is
nobody informed her about this, or was she informed?
I have no idea if staff on their side told her that this office is supposed to exist and it doesn't exist right now. But what happened is you had a director for a little while. The director goes away. An interim is appointed, and over time, people who worked in that office went away or they were moved around, and then at some point, the interim goes away too, and then we just look up and there's no office, right? And so what's important, I think, is to make sure that the public understand that the law says X. Their elected representatives went and passed a law, and X wasn't happening.
So, first of all, who asked you to look into this, or did anybody have to ask you to look into it? So you did that on your own volition as far as the auditor's office?
Correct. So for our performance audit division, this is a division that is looking for places in state government that maybe are inefficient, or places in state government where the law is not being followed, or places in state government where we have concerns about the validity of numbers or data or metrics, and I have a ton of discretion as state auditor to pick those projects. So
it's not like some county in the state of Mississippi is reporting something going on nefarious.
Correct.
This is the investigative part of the office itself.
This is the performance audit division, and I get to pick the projects. Nobody asked me to pick this project. What happens is, and this is important to say, I think, this is not just Shad sitting behind a computer picking stuff on the internet that looks interesting and then writing a little report about it. There are 135 people who work in the auditor's office, and they're professional staff who do this for a living all day, every day. And so what happens is they bring me a set of projects. It might be 10 or 20, and they say, look, here's where we think there is risk in state government. In other words, here's where we think there may be problems. We don't know, but we think maybe there are problems. Will you look at this and read it? Let's talk about it. And you pick 5 of them to do this year. You pick 10 of them to do over the course of 2 years. So that's how it works. And when the report gets written, it gets written by those professional staff who are putting their careers on the line.
Why wouldn't peer committee have highlighted this a long time ago?
Well, I think peer committee does some similar stuff to what our performance audit division does. And there's, just to be blunt about it, there's plenty of work to go around. Yeah. Peer gets to pick projects based on what the legislators want them to do, and they do a lot of stuff that we don't get to. We do a lot of stuff that they don't get to, and that's a good thing. I think you put those reports together, and we get a lot of good results.
So first of all, was there any money that went into this kitty, and where did that money go?
Yeah, so it's a point that Dr. Wright has made, and I think it's a legitimate point, that apparently back in the day when this office was required by the legislature, there wasn't additional money that was given. So, you could
How much are we talking about?
No, there was not additional.
There was not?
There was not. Okay. So, you can make the argument, well, we set up this office, but we didn't have additional funding to do it. We should have had additional funding. But that's an argument. If you're Dr. Wright or your MD, you have to make it the legislature. You have to tell them this is being shut down because we don't have cash. You can't just not.
But as far as the law is concerned, the monetary part of that is not your concern.
That's right. I mean, the law still requires this office to exist. You have to follow the law. I do in my office. You do, as an everyday citizen.
What does this mean to the grades that we have heard, or the numbers that we heard? What are the validity of those? Do we are they worse? Do we know? And we'll talk all about that when we come back. Sure. Okay, we are back with Shad White. We have limited time here, so Perez, if you don't mind, sir, we can fade that one down and get back to this. All right, I want to know, first of all, the rates themselves, the graduation rates. Are they bogus, what we have now? Are we not showing any improvements? Where are we with that one, and what issues were taken up by Dr. Wright at the Department of Education?
So I'll start out by saying that we have shown improvement in the graduation rate, and there's a ton of credit to go around, including credit that should go to the Mississippi Department of Education and teachers and parents and administrators and students alike. But back in 2006, the graduation rate as reported by MDE was about 61%. The legislature said in the law, y'all need to get that up to 85% by the 2018-2019 school year. So get that up. Get it from 61 to 85. MDE and everybody else improved our graduation rate, but between 2006 and now, MDE also changed how it calculated our graduation rate. So what they did, just not to be too technical, but to give you a little idea, what they did is they started counting repeaters. So the kids who graduated, kids who had to repeat 12th grade and then graduated, they started counting those as original graduates. And what that did is boost the graduation rate statistically by about 9.7%. So legislature says graduation rate is 61%, get it up to 85. MDE and others helped improve the graduation rate, but they also did a statistical change in the middle there that boosted their numbers by about 10%.
Wait a minute, but who said you couldn't do that?
Nobody said you couldn't do that, right? So I'm my position on this and the auditor's office position is we're not here to say that the old way of calculating was right. Mm-hmm. We're not here to say that the new way of calculating is right. We're not here to say that you can't change it in the middle. But I'm telling you that when this report came out, I talked to legislators, not a single one of them knew that the graduation rate method, the calculation method, had been changed. And so I think it's important for the public to know.
I'm having a little problem on this one. Again, sure. Shad White, state auditor, is my guest. I'm having a little problem on this because even if it's the second time, that's a graduation, that's a score. Yep. That is a valid score.
Yep.
But you're seeing the whole audit is condemning the graduation currently the way it is because only the repeater, or are there other parts of this equation?
No, that's the most important part. And what I would say is we're not really condemning the way the graduation rate is calculated right now. What I would say is it's important for the public and legislators to understand that there was this change in the calculation method. Mm-hmm. And
who made that change? When you say they made the change, who is they and when was it made?
MDE back in 2007, actually. So again,
this was also prior
pre
to
Dr. Wright. That's exactly right. So what I think probably should have happened is that MDE should have made it clear to the legislature that, y'all gave us this goal to boost the graduation rate by X amount. You need to know that we changed how we calculate it. So if you want to give us an updated goal, maybe 9.7% higher than what you gave us previously, then that would be an understandable thing to do. Instead, what happened is nobody found out about it in the legislature.
I got you.
And then we had a series of press releases talking about how much the graduation rate had improved.
Are we talking about an adjustment of what, 9, 10%?
Correct.
9, 10,
yep.
9 or 10?
9.7.
9.7?
Yep.
So now you're looking at 61, and it's not 84, it's what, 74, 75?
Right, correct. That would be about right. Yep.
So it's still an improvement.
It's still an improvement, and that's very important to note. And I want to give a lot of credit out to, the folks on the front lines, teachers, parents, students, but also administrators and folks at MDE. That's a lot of improvement, and people should be very proud of it. But we also have to be transparent in this business. I have to show folks what I do in the auditor's office. I put every contract, every RFP out on the internet. We have to be clear with the public about what's going on.
So we didn't need to spend the money, to be honest with you, as far as setting up an agency, did we?
Well, so here's what I would say about that. Graduation rate improved, clearly, without an Office of Dropout Prevention. The legislature said there should have been an office. You don't get to ignore the law just because you think you might know a better way to do it, right?
No.
You don't get to drive here in the morning 90 miles an hour just because you think nobody's going to get hurt. I don't get to ignore the law in my office either. So what should have happened is Office of Dropout Prevention should have existed as the law required, and then we probably would have made more progress on the graduation rate. Even if we didn't, frankly, it's still what the law requires. They got to do it. There's no way around it.
So, and within the Department of Education.
Correct. Yep.
So, where are we now with that? Did the state auditor suggest a time level or time table to do that?
We made some recommendations, and some of the recommendations include the legislature. The legislature probably wants to ask some questions about the Office of Dropout Prevention. May want to update their law. Update the goals, update what the law says about reporting on the Office of Dropout Prevention. Let me say something real quick, too, about some of the criticisms that Dr. Wright leveled against the report. One thing she said is that this is a performance audit, and you didn't include any performance measures in there. Well, it's very difficult to measure the performance of an office that doesn't exist, right? It would be like you asking me to count the number of yards you ran as a running back for the Saints last year. Well, I can't do that because you weren't on the Saints last year. So
you didn't have to break that news.
I'm very sorry. Yeah. Not to be offensive about your running ability. I'm sure you're quick. But The issue
depends on which buffet it is.
The issue is that we have a set of laws, and it needs to be followed. They need to be followed. The public needs to understand how you're doing business. And my job as auditor is to paint facts onto those situations, make sure people understand what's going on.
So as state auditor, there is a law that has not been upheld, and
Correct.
that is your duty to find out and correct that situation.
Correct. And, there are people who say, well, you shouldn't point all these things out every single time. These are nitpicky things. It's not nitpicky to change the graduation rate calculation.
And I didn't read her full report. As I said, it takes a Rhodes Scholar to write this and 2 Rhodes Scholars to listen to or read her report also, because most of the time it's like the testing controversy. They lose half of us or 3/4 of us by the time they get to the second page. But what was her recommendations? That she thought that office was needed, not needed, or did she have any suggestions at all as far as what the Department of Education needed to do?
I read her response. I mean, it's a long response. It's about 41 pages. Mm-hmm. To me, nothing in the response changes the fact that the law says that they're required to set it up, and they're going to have to set that office up and keep it running.
Doesn't say how big it has to be, does it?
No, it doesn't, but it's got to have a director. So, for instance, a part of that law statute says the state superintendent of education shall, not should, not may, shall set up the Office of Dropout Prevention and have a director, appoint a director. So you got to do those things, just like I have to do certain things in my job. You have
to do those things. The legislature could come in and with one swoop of the pen there, or from the Education Committee, and probably kill that committee or kill that bill.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So they could come back in, and look, that's a conversation that they could have, too. Mm-hmm. Dr. Wright might go to the legislature and say, look, really, this office is not necessary, that we've improved the graduation rate without that office. And the legislature might say, you know what, as it turns out, we agree with you, and we're going to get rid of that statute. That would be a completely understandable position to take. My point is that that's the legislature's decision.
So our dropout rates that we have heard since 2009 have been bogus for the most part, or overrated about 9 or 10 points.
I wouldn't say bogus. I would say that the calculation rate was changed. And you could make an argument that the new way of calculating it is more accurate and a better reflection of how our education system is doing. The point to me is that people need to understand how we got those numbers.
If they had somewhere down the line put a disclaimer at the bottom of the page with a little asterisk said, we have changed this, would that have been appropriate?
Would have been nice. That would have been good. And I'll say this. I've talked to a lot of people since the report came out. I talked to a couple of people before the report came out, and basically no one knew that this had happened. Mm-hmm. Did you know it had happened?
No.
I did not know it had happened until we did the audit of this office. And I follow these things pretty closely. I've followed them closely for a long time. And so I want to make a general point about transparency in state government. People are just tired. Normal people out there are just tired of not knowing how folks in an office, elites who are sitting over there with college degrees and master's degrees, got the results that they're getting. Yeah. And we can re-earn that trust if we go out and we just show people what we're doing and how we're doing it.
And Shad White is my guest state auditor. And Shad, especially in education, because we all worry that when Washington, or the federal government, or even the state offers incentives for improved grades, we want to make damn sure they're not fabricated.
That's exactly right. That's right.
And that just counters the entire effort there, and that shouldn't be done. So I agree with you.
So let me throw out a bone, too, on this point. Putting aside the graduation rate, we see that NAEP scores, it's a national test that measures student achievement, NAEP scores have improved a great deal by Mississippi students. I have no reason to believe that those are manufactured at all. And you can't change the calculation rate because the tests are done by a national organization. Let's give credit out there to folks who have made sure that those scores increase. That's a great thing. Putting out a report like this and lending some transparency to something, this is not full-throated criticism of everything in education at all. I'm a product of our public schools. I want us to do well. I think we have done some good things over the past few years. Public education gave me the pathway here. I don't get to be sitting here. I don't come from a political family. I don't come from a wealthy family. Public education gave me a pathway from public schools in Mississippi to Ole Miss to Oxford University to Harvard to here. That's my pathway, and I owe it all of it to the public school system. So we've done a good job, and we need to keep working on it.
Final seconds here. Any billboard or disclaimer coming up, or not disclaimer, but billboard, the next coming events of another Shad White.
You know, we're going to work really hard on making sure that our data around how we track student outcomes is accurate. So we're going to have more on that.
Yeah.
I think it won't be as explosive as what we're talking about here, but it's important. All of it's important.
Stay tuned. More coming. Always good seeing you, sir.
Thank you for having me, Paul. Appreciate
You got it. We got more coming.